Well, welcome everyone. We're so glad to have you with us today. This is the beginning of our 2018 Guided Path series of interviews with experts who matter to you. And today I'm so pleased to be able to welcome Dr. Rich Feller. He is a researcher. He's been researching for over 30 years in career and interest and assessments. He's done consulting in all states and included 6 different continents. So welcome, Dr. Feller. We're glad to have you with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's always fun to be among colleagues. So thank you for those listening.
So we're glad to have everybody here. And we are kicking off a series this year. We're going to talk about trendsetters, people who've pioneered, who looked at doing something new and different, thinking outside the box. And so I was very intrigued with the research that you've done on assessments and careers and personalities. And there's some very traditional way of things that people look at those, but you look at them from an untraditional way. So, and what you're looking at is interest. How does that help students in terms of picking majors and colleges?
Well, I would expect my colleagues who are listening have all been involved and maybe trained in the strong interest inventory, for example, and the Myers-Briggs, because that's what's written in every textbook. And I certainly have great respect for them. And actually, I'm author of a tool called the Harrington-O'Shea Career Decision-Making System used by 20 million people. So I really appreciate interest surveys. The challenge is I've come to learn that in many ways, they just report the past. They're post facto. And as a result of that, how you like or don't like something is based upon what you've done in life. So when the surveys ask you what you want to do or what you like to do, it's based upon past experience, which I think is very much a class issue in America today. If you go to the library or museum on a Saturday, that's very different than if you're staying home and you're amongst a bunch of adults who aren't really taking care of you or your interests. So to me, interests have value, but interest alone, I've come to believe, are limited, dangerous, and in some ways really extend a social justice issue.
So what's the alternative? How do you remedy that? And what would be a better way of looking at it? As I totally agree, especially with first generation students. They haven't been exposed, their families haven't been exposed, and they're trying to go to college for the first time, or even students who have had a lot of exposure, their exposure may be very limited. So what's the remedy for that?
Sure. And I was an admissions counselor as well, so I saw a lot of that. So I got involved, fortunately, with some questions around aptitude assessment. And aptitude assessment has been kind of left out of the literature for the last 20 years for various reasons. But what we tried to take a look at was, what if we could get back and use the new technology we have, which is online, buy the very best research we have and the best tools, use the best human performance people to normalize these kind of experiences, and develop kind of a set of brain games, which are really traditional performance-based opportunities to measure what comes natural to you. What are your natural and stable aptitudes? So a group of, frankly, venture capitalists came to me and said, we're frustrated that so many of our children go to Brown and there's $200,000 expended in their home and they're sitting on the couch becoming baristas. So what do we do about that? So we put together this company called YouScience, based out of Nashville, Tennessee, youscience.com. Our CEO helped create WebMD, so we have the best technology. We've really done a lot with great analytics, and said, let's find a way using online tool assessment, short little teeny bites, takes about an hour and a half of all of our assessments, to give you feedback about what comes natural and are stable in your experience, because aptitudes really shouldn't change. And then if we combine them with self-interest that we can get through the many different tools, we use the government's profiler, and then algorithmically put them together, we'll be able to have better science. And with that science, we can make better recommendations about things you might want to go explore. We're not interested in tracking at all. We just want to give you better career science. And if we only stay with interest, you're really looking at making decisions, choosing majors, pursuing careers based upon very limited information that we know changes based upon what you're exposed to. So we call that exposure bias. What we'd rather do is take a look at what comes natural and stable to you by measuring it, and then finding out what your aptitudes are. And when we put them together, we can make much better recommendations.
So how do you measure? How do you take an online tool and measure those aptitudes?
Sure. Well, I'd like to direct you to the website because there's a short video, and I'll send it to everyone here if you like. It's about 2 minutes, which is real hip. It's driven to attract 14 to 27-year-olds, even though we find we can use this for many age groups, which really takes a look at having you using your computer be able to look in 3D, be able to take a look at how you calculate and look at numerical reasoning and some of those idea generation assessments that we have, which allow you to say, this is really what you do easily, efficiently, and it helps you know what your potential is because things come easily for you. The challenge with aptitudes, we don't even know what our aptitudes are because we don't get feedback from school. And because we have good aptitudes in one area, we don't even know they're exceptional because we don't even have to work to do them. If you use GPA or achievement scores, you're really tied or class rank, you're tied to issues around how well you studied, what high school you went to, did your mother have a good reading level, and what kind of school did you go to? So we're looking at something we call hidden gems that give you additional information that from that we can algorithmically make recommendations on 500 plus family livable wage jobs, tie you to careers and information about yourself that my audience here, regardless of what you do, can use that through a walkthrough and give your students much more information. And fortunately, because of the way we enable to use technology, we're able to price it at a level that no one should be able to go without.
So in terms of, as a counselor and as advisor, and as we work with students, we have had all these different choices, and career in college is such a big topic right now. And you've talked about the aptitudes. Why, what is the difference? Like in some of these other tools, they talk about self-reporting. Why is that an issue? And
Sure.
what you're talking about is aptitudes, which is measuring actually where the students, and you talked about they're natural and stable. So why is there such a prevalence on this other format?
Yeah. Well, frankly, it's cheaper because interest tests are just asking you to tell us what you like. A very good tool is the Gallup Strengths Finder, and I believe in it fully. I love it. It gives you lots of good language, but it doesn't really say what your capabilities are. You basically self-report to identify what your strengths are, which then give you marvelous language to explain yourself. But let's say everyone in our audience today has really high scores in ideation and maybe command. Well, that doesn't tell me, that may be their strengths, but it really doesn't tell me how one is better than another. This person is better than the other. Are they all equal in capacity? So that's an example of a self-report. It doesn't really compare you to other people. Or aptitudes allow you to identify what comes natural to you and how does that compare to other people, not in some percentage score, but what do you do very best? And let's find occupations and college majors that will be attracted to you because they will allow you to do your very best, which is to learn quickly, have potential, be efficient, and things will come quite naturally. And I think the interest test and things like the Strengths Finder or tools like that are helpful, but they're not based upon performance. For example, if I take an aptitude test, I have real high idea generation, which means that I naturally, without even knowing it, can come up with ideas and responses. That's neat in a politician, a keynoter, a professor, a teacher, a salesperson. Now, my wife doesn't have hardly any idea generation. It just doesn't come natural to her. She has a lot of 3D and spatial relationship skills. So if I go to a neurosurgeon, I don't want them to have a lot of idea generation. I want them to really be able to do the kind of things they do well. So I describe it as every job or major in a way has kind of a glove that fits it. So why not find a glove that's natural and allow you to explore using your most efficient way to identify potential? If I only make decisions about majors and programs based upon my interest, I might get there with some sense of passion, but don't have the capacity to do well. One of the silliest books I've ever seen with a great title was Do What You Love and the Money Will Follow. I think that's a great book, especially for the author who sold thousands of them. But if I don't have capacity and I only have passion, I ought to stick more about in my hobby area. I want to really find out where my mastery comes from, which is really where my internal motivation drives me with my aptitude into areas and work environments that interest me. To me, that's a much saner way to go. And I can only tell you, I've seen that work in my family. That's my best advice. Plus, I have lots of research I can share when it's appropriate.
I know there are Johnson O'Connor centers throughout the country. I'm in California. I've had students go up to the ones in San Francisco and Los Angeles and spend 2 days and thousands of dollars trying to find out what their aptitudes are. And, and this is a way of taking that same concept and applying it on an online virtual perspective. Is that
It's
correct?
beautiful, and I couldn't have said it better. I also understand the Highlands and the Johnson O'Connor and have taken them, and I think they're wonderful tools. The
Mm-hmm.
challenge is I have to fly to a city or spend many times $600 to take each of those. We've been able to, through technology, to take those same kind of tests using technologies online and bring the cost way down and be able to do it in real time without having to fly to a city to do it. And then we have a reporting system which is interactive online so people can really see really what that means to them and how they can interact with their career and explore right online. Again, I think those are great tools. The challenges are they're not getting to many people. They reach only an elite sector of society. They're not online. They're not interactive when you get them. And you have to go travel to get that done. So we think we've taken those features away.
Well, and now we're in such a global society. I mean, we have people watching this that are all over the world, and they need to be able to offer tools and resources. And we're also working with Generation Z, and their perspective is going to be, they're much more attuned to that, maybe more receptive to that too. So you've talked about gamification. Talk about that, why that's important for this, for us in technology, and as we work with students as advisors. How does that fit in?
Sure, sure. Well, my background was I was an admissions counselor at junior high and a senior high and vocational school counselor and worked in special education. So then I became a counselor trainer. And what I've watched is that the new generation is all about finding ways to learn with stimulation. And I looked at education, and education used to be kind of an intellectual experience. It's now an experience. And gamification is really creates simulations. It creates immediate engagement. So I see a whole new industry looking at our field and say, how do we gamify it so we can make it more engaging for individuals? So some of you may have heard of the Nodal motivated skill cards or the values card sorts, and many other card sorts that were out there. Those are tools I really like and believe, and they're also a form of gamification. However, Mark Franklin and I, in our company called onelifetools.com, and I encourage you to go there, there's all kinds of free services and also one-to-one demos of our game, which we call Who You Are Matters. Who You Are Matters is basically, we believe, a 2-day retreat in 2 hours. And it's a board game where you basically tell stories by using these prompts that we have, which allow you to talk about your assets and strengths, your natural interests, other people, how you're described, which allows you to then come together through a narrative assessment model rather than a trait factor model of the other tool I mentioned, to allow you to tell stories and be with people and get peer feedback that allows you to articulate what you want more of in life. You actually finish with kind of a career statement, which you then have to read and people give you feedback on so you can act upon possibilities. Our goal is trying to get our tools to scale. There's just too many needs out there. And I believe that the audience that I'm talking about are in organizations or private consultants. We're trying to get products to you that are such a good price point that you can maximize your reach and find more ways to get potential buyers of your programs. And then also go online, because we have an online storyteller with the game. So people can complete things at home for the rest of their life, write more stories, get reports almost like the old kind of printout ones that tell about what you want more out of life and what are your strengths. So the gamification is here. I see it everywhere. We're trying to include that in what we know about career development and make the game highly engaging using peer-to-peer support so we can go to scale. When I go to a high school, I can serve 30 students myself playing the game because they're individual games of 4 or 5 people and the game leads itself. But they finish with a product they can then take to the counselor, which gives the counselor all kinds of data that the person couldn't have collected in that time alone. So that's how I look at gamification. I see all kinds of ways to do that. And then tie that to online storytelling allows the person to go home and do it yourself to get more information.
And that makes sense, because then you're engaging the students or the individual and giving them something, and they have a product, something that tangible at the end that they can relate to.
Yeah, exactly. We have to reach more people. The needs are going up, resources are going down in public schools. So there's so many good people doing things in the private sector which can reach audience to say, I can give you whole programs. And when those programs can be tools that can be interactive, done at home, frankly, consultants can upsell them, and then show much larger reach to individuals. And when they can go home and do things and create things online or play games in groups, and then bring that material, it's a much more engaging experience. And we have all kinds of evidence that that's the trends that are working for us.
So going back to, kind of your experience, and you talked about being an educator and an admissions advisor. What prompted you to look into this, to be that trendsetter and look outside the box of what other people were doing?
Well, you're very kind to be called the trendsetter. I was just trying to pay attention to what student needs were and then try to understand public schools as well as colleges and how they couldn't really meet the needs that were there. And then try to watch the private sector and what they were doing, because they could find a way through efficiency sometimes to upsell what they provided, but give more service to a certain population. Taking all that, I came back to the notion with many other bright thinkers to say, how do we get more at scale tools where people can do more of the work themselves? So when they meet with a good college or career advisor, you're doing more integration and deeper thinking and higher level of development, as opposed to collecting scores that we can do so much differently. So that's really where I wanted to go. Part of my background was I got a 64 in my New York State Regents English exam, was told not to go to college. That had a lot to do with my wonderful parents who we didn't have books in our house. My father had a high school education. My mother had an 8th grade education. I wasn't around people who talked about going to college. I was a first generation student. So that really motivated me because I got a voice. And only after I got interested in Vietnam War protesting and some civil rights issue did I become a learner. And I had recognized, gosh, there were things in me that I didn't even know I did well. How come I didn't figure those out? And those are what I would call natural and stable aptitudes. Another unique experience, and I've had a few, was I worked at headquarters in NASA. And they would say, Rich, find us more bright kids. And I go, that's not the question. You don't need higher IQ. You need to find people who have the aptitudes, who can do the task you're trying to get done. Because what was happening is they weren't looking at people of color or women. So as a result of that, we left all kinds of populations out because they weren't interested in the kind of occupations we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you give somebody mastery and they're told you have the potential to do this, they begin saying, wow, what does that mean? And to me, that's where I see this as a large social justice issue.
That's a very good point, and I think one that a lot of times we don't recognize as counselors and advisors is how it's kind of a hidden bias that we need to be made aware of.
Yeah, I think you're so right. Cindy, I'm aware there's a couple questions come up. Do you want me to try to address those? And I'll do my best.
There's some really good questions that are here. And so and this is a great time for me to point out to our audience, there is a question box at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So you can enter in your questions and we'll be addressing them as we're talking, or at the end. If we don't have time to go into all of them, we'll be addressing them individually later on. Julissa says, don't you find that strengths and weaknesses change or improve over time? So this goes into the stabilization of aptitudes, and you talk about natural and stable aptitudes and the ages. So how about when they stabilize, and if you get into something, you may find, I don't want to do this, or my strengths and weaknesses have changed.
Sure. So let's kind of break that into pieces. I think we'd say that the brain develops our natural aptitudes around age 14, and we do believe they're stable, and there's lots of good research to say that. Now, it doesn't say that you can't use your not as strong aptitudes to learn things. We're just saying aptitudes predict potential to learn quickly, efficiently, and easily for you. So we want to find out what comes easiest for you and then tap those into how you can best learn. Strengths and weakness is really a judgment based upon who. So that's when we talk about what are your strengths, your weaknesses, who are you comparing to? So I think that's another way to understand it. We don't report aptitudes in percentages because we really don't care where you come in compared to other people, because you can't do much about them. They're stable and they're natural to you. The key is which ones are your strongest that you can use best, because you're then driven by internal motivation and able to apply them without even really knowing them. So I think it takes a while to explain to people what aptitudes really mean. They get confused with the words of strengths or abilities or strengths and weaknesses. So that takes a little time, but I hope if people would, and I'll show some slides later that might be helpful, read into what aptitudes mean, because people haven't been talking about this for 20 years. That's the challenge.
Right, right. That's very true. So Susanna says she's a international counselor. She says, I've researched youth science and love it. I'm an international counselor and work with students for whom English is their second language. The vocabulary section, in my opinion, is aimed for students with English as their first language. Are you planning on developing this in other languages? Or is there a Google Translate or something like that? I know in Guided Path we have Google Translate for that exact reason.
And I think that's a wonderful question. And let me try to step back and say this. When we talk about youth science being an aptitude assessment, it certainly is. And we have core drivers, practical amplifiers, and visual amplifiers that we measure that are purely performance-based. But we also give you information on what we call our personal approach. And personal approach are those things that you really talk to us about yourself and self-report, which are time frame orientation, your work approach, and your interpersonal stuff. So we give you back some of that information that Myers-Briggs gives you, or what they're giving, and we get it to it differently. We give you a sense of whether you're a time frame person looking long distance or short distance in terms of time. But we also give you feedback about vocabulary. Now, vocabulary is not an aptitude. It can be very well developed, and the more you read, the bigger your vocabulary gets. But we don't go into defining how those are different to the user, so we just call it an aptitude test. Because knowing and getting feedback about vocabulary is critical, but it doesn't connect you to your aptitudes and aptitudes are needed in each job. So I would say, yes, vocabulary is very much English-based, and we use only English words to try to get at that. So for this wonderful question, you may not even want to do that vocabulary piece if that becomes an issue, but the other performance-based feedback would be really critical. So I think it's a great question. It again just takes time to explain what we can deliver, and actually, we are being contacted by other countries, and what the implications of that I can't speak to today. But if you're using performance-based tools that are causing you to do things, vocabulary is far less important, because we don't use vocabulary in measuring what your potential is. Good question.
Yeah, it's always, again, looking at our global economy and our global world. And there's so much culture and everything that comes with the language that it has to be in their natural native tongue as much as possible. And that's one of the reasons we switched from one of the tools we were using, because I found with my ESL students, they just weren't able to really accurately respond to it because it had that cultural bias. That's very interesting.
I just returned from Singapore and India because there's great interest in both of those countries, because they have come to the agreement that they were developing countries that started with interest testing, and that's helpful, but they've begun to see the cost of that if we don't get feedback on natural capacity, we struggle. I also work with the 16 Western governors and the Western Governors Association, and they said to me, Rich, it's amazing. We really never recognized how much money we were spending on using interest surveys to help people, which became kind of a compliance function of schools, but there was no longitudinal study. There wasn't any information used about curriculum offerings, and it gave no feedback about what the person was capable of doing. So internationally, I see that question coming up to me often.
So we have Barbara asked, how do you correlate aptitudes to majors? So you've got this, you get these results, and then how strong is the correlation, and where is the data coming from?
Sure. So let's look at it backwards. If we took people who are very satisfied in majors and looked at what they majors were and knew their aptitudes, you can go backwards. And then you have these aptitudes, what major should interest you. So we've been able to do that and recommend majors for people to consider and suggest other ways they can get that experience to maximize their aptitude. The challenge, I think, is we oversell majors. Like, I think there's really only 4 majors, and I hope I remember how to say this, but the majors are really, if you're basically STEM oriented, you're going to have math, because that's the basis of STEM. That's one major. The second one is really performing arts. You have to show me how well you can play an instrument, or how well you can sing, or can you spin a pot, or whatever. That's kind of show me and demonstrate that. All third majors are really those that are credentialed or somehow licensed. And when you take those majors, you don't get a lot of choices. You have to follow what the state says you need to do to complete that OT, PT, architecture, whatever license you go after. And the fourth major is all the rest. And all the rest are the ones that hiring managers tell me, it doesn't really matter what you have. If you apply to this job, I get resumes with all those majors. What you're giving me is basically a content generalist who is asking and having to demonstrate what social capital do they have to go get internships and experience and build a portfolio that I can vet in industry. So for me, I think we oversubscribe on the importance of majors. The key would be getting a clarity about, if I get this, what can I do with it after? And I love liberal arts, I'm all for that, but I would suggest many majors are giving people good, lifelong critical thinking and learning skills, but they're content generalists. And while they're in school, the key is to get them capital support and access human capital, social capital, so they can make leads and internships and experiences. They can show documentation of performances. If you're in STEM, we recognize you've got to have some science and appreciation of technology. And without that, these STEM careers are not going to happen for you. So I'm trying to make it as simple as I can.
I think that's very interesting. And that's definitely, you're talking to our hearts as counselors and advisors. Sometimes the challenge is communicating that to parents, and being able to share that. So you mentioned employers. So what kind of response have you gotten from this perspective from employers? Are they finding that then this is making it easier for them to find that human capital, or, what kind of outcomes are you finding there?
I'm thrilled you're asking that, because that's not a question most of us are used to paying attention to. But I would say this: what if I'm going to go to slides next, Cindy, but we'll just stop.
Okay.
If I'm an employer in Atlanta and I have these jobs to fill from PhD down to entry level, I'd like to know where are the aptitudes sitting that we know would help perform those tasks and learn those skills to do those jobs. Much like when you're in Alabama looking for a running back or a basketball player at UCLA, you can find out who runs the fastest and who can shoot the best. How come we can't find out what's the talent in our community? Where are the aptitudes residing? So when you talk to business, they get real excited about this, because they say, well, you're going to tell me not only who might have these degrees, which really doesn't tell me very much as an employer. You're telling me you could aggregate data to know what aptitudes reside in each college or each high school? And I go, yeah, that's the kind of data we collect. Now, we can't give that to you because of confidentiality, but what if you plan career fair or provided internships, paying attention to the talent you're needing to develop? Look what that could do. Like, we're finding employers, frankly, are so excited about this, they're paying for it to be used in schools. So why don't we bring up those slides, and maybe I can walk through the research that demonstrates that.
Yeah.
And audience, thank you very much for your interest. I just have to say that I've changed my thinking, being a sole proponent of using interests only, and now see the value of using aptitudes and putting that together with really good science. And what's wonderful about use science, every time somebody takes the tool, machine learning makes it even better in terms of making recommendations. So I'll walk you through a few slides that might be helpful, and we'll go from there. So that's okay. And you can see that theoretically, what I'm suggesting is we're trying to find all of your students what I call best fit. And best fit is that connection of interest and aptitudes when they come together. What I really want to do is I want every one of our students and people we love and our kids to chase their internal motivation. And internal motivation comes when I'm working hard at something without looking at the watch, what Sigma High calls flow, and really just loving what I'm doing. And that happens when I'm using my natural aptitudes, because I don't even know that I'm using it. It doesn't feel like work. It's coming so easily. So what I'd like you to recognize is that on the left-hand side, we can measure self-reported interests. We can go from high to low. And the top, you'll notice there's high or weak, or low to high, which is really one person's aptitudes in each of the aptitudes. So if you notice the blue arrow, we want to find a way to give your students some recommendations for best fit, where they have those natural aptitudes that are theirs and only theirs, and how they can be using them in environments that interest them. When that happens, there's a best fit for that student, and we want to give them that kind of information. If you'll notice in the upper left-hand area where there's a circle around struggle fit. We all know people who have all kinds of interest in being this or that because that's what they've seen in their culture and they've experienced exposure bias about that. But what if they don't have the glove fit? If they don't have the aptitudes that are required to do that, they're going to struggle. They're going to experience tension, be challenged. They're not going to be rewarded by using those lower aptitudes that aren't really needed in this job, even if it's in interest of high environments that are of high interest. At the bottom right, you'll notice the student who walks across campus every year, they now have their degree, and they take a degree and they get a job in a major that's been related to that job, and they have the high aptitudes to do the job but had very low interest, but only did the job because of the money. And that's the external fit, which we know is wonderful when you're right out of school. And at 30, you're going, God, I'm so hollow. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not interested in doing that. It's such a drain to be doing things, even though I'm good at them. I don't really enjoy them. We call that the extrinsic reward fit. And the bottom right is the danger area where people don't get feedback of what they're interested in, don't get exposed to more things, and they don't get feedback about their natural aptitudes, so they just reside with whatever they have. And we think that's a very draining fit. We know lots of people are just drained every day because they have no idea really what they're interested in, haven't exposed to many things. And secondly, they aren't really clear on what their natural aptitudes are, so they never blend them into action to take advantage of what's their natural potential. So that's the theoretical foundation, Cindy, if that's helpful.
That's very helpful. Yes, that explains. And that relates to another question that Jaleesa had is sometimes people may have an aptitude and be good at something, but not have a real interest in it. So
yeah, think of all the colleagues we have outside this field who are good at something, but just aren't interested. And they go, God, I can't wait to retire. I can't wait to get out. And they've never really explored their interest. What's nice about youth science is you only need to take your aptitudes once because they're stable, but we give you 10 years license to keep taking the interest inventory. Should your interest change, you'll then get different recommendations. We report our scores by what your interests are, what your aptitudes measured are, and then bring them together to an overall fit. Let's go to the next slide and see if that's helpful. So one example of the research, and we now have research in many, many states, is we went down to Georgia and surveyed about 12,000 students. And you look at the demographics of this particular school district. And we also looked at industries that are in high demand right now, and there's 4 of them. And you can see this is looking like a traditional American high school with the demographics as they appear. So with that in mind, let's go to the next slide. And we then asked the Chamber of Commerce, well, what are the occupations you can't fill right now? And these are 38 of them. And you'll notice they go from really high traditional education levels to really good technical training. And you'll notice in technology, construction, manufacturing, healthcare, these are all in demand in Atlanta right now. So we can hope that students find their way to HR people and get together on that, and we can assess whether they have a major that'll be useful. And again, we get back to how many people apply for jobs with that 4th category of all the rest of occupations. What if we could find people that could fill these jobs based upon their aptitudes? Let's go to the next slide. So then we take a look at this particular population, and we ask these young people about their interest levels. And you'll notice in the bottom blue and green, blue being male and green being female, if you ask people about do they have interest in what are their interests, and then we crosswalk to say how do they fit for those occupations, you begin to see how the scores appear. And we're finding that there's no significant difference in aptitudes to do those jobs. Well, that's a real social justice finding. We're saying finally there's no difference in male and female in having the aptitudes to do these jobs. That's something we haven't been able to say before. We thought it, but now we have some evidence. Second, we're finding 3.4 times more females have fit for those occupations looking at their aptitudes rather than their interests. That's a big deal. If you think about all the young women now are being told you have the potential to do those 38 high demand jobs, and you've demonstrated by performance you have the potential to do them. If we only ask you about your interest, you don't even learn about them. That's a big issue. The next one, we're now looking at race. And what's amazing is we find the aptitudes that are needed are across all races at equal levels. That's significant. So we can't say that some people can't do things as well as others. We have evidence to show they can. And then we go take a look at them by race and interest to do those occupations. And look what we find. 2.5x more black boys have the aptitude to do those jobs.
Wow.
And 2 times as many whites and Hispanic students can do those. Look at all the hidden talent that Atlanta has, but they don't even know about it. Do you think employers like this data? They love it. And that's what we're beginning to do, to say, how do we build partnerships with current tech education, apprenticeships, college majors, career fairs, and employers to say, how do we work in partnerships to give this information to kids 14 and above, usually junior and senior high school students, and then allow them to have this as they get language to tell their story to admissions counselors or to counselors to write letters of recommendations, and also have better information to explore things that are going to help them to get in occupations they have a real internal motivation to do. And what we've tried to do is, in use science, create something called Describing Me, so the student can call up on their phone and see the results and talk right to an interview with them on their phone, or a college counselor can write using these words that we've presented to you that come from the evidence of what your data says. We think counselors love this.
So how do you help students to identify what their aptitudes are and then start building that interest? Because if I have an aptitude as a woman to go into construction, I would never have thought of that. How do I find that out?
Wow, wouldn't it be cool if I could have found you an internship last summer that got you to look at that? Wouldn't it be cool if I put you in a career fair and got you to a panel of women in that industry and they talked about what it's like to be a woman in the industry? Wouldn't it be cool if we gave you a scholarship to a community college because they have training programs in that area, and got you connected to a summer job with an employer who's now following your career and says, if you come work with us, we'll pay for your bachelor's degree? Wouldn't that be cool?
That would be fabulous.
Talk about inefficiencies and making our process more accelerated, not tracking people, just helping them explore things that are closer to what's natural to them. That's the goal.
So talk about this slide, the aligns labor supply and demand.
So I'm not an economist, but I've tried to study it, and I think I'm getting fairly used to the language of economists. And if you look at this particular chart here, if you look in the red, if you give people interest inventories, 86% of them come down in areas of interest of social and artistic areas. Why? Because that's what we show kids. They don't see work anymore. Look at the number of young men not working in America. The numbers are really changing. Look at the number of men not going to college. It's really increasing. But if we just ask people what they like, look at what it is they like. And then on the right-hand side, look at them that are having interest-based recommendations in what we call the jobs in demand in STEM, for example. The bottom, now take a look at the blue one. 26% come up with aptitudes that would fit these high demand jobs if you only give interest tests. But 56% of them come up if you look at their aptitudes toward these jobs.
Wow.
That's pretty convincing to a parent. And this is not saying don't go to Brown and get a liberal arts education. We're not saying that at all. But if you knew this information, you might know why you study better, what you do best in, chase your interests with these capabilities, get involved in internships, projects that relate to you. It's a much more mastery-based engagement kind of approach.
So one of the questions here is, is this offered for older people in their 30s or 40s as an opportunity as well?
Great question. When you go to our website, YouScience, youscience.com, you're going to see examples of really 14 to 27, because we're really going after initially that audience, because that's really, if we can get them early, we can really solve a lot of problems. I can tell you from personal experience, we're collecting amazing amounts of data who are finding YouScience online at our retail price and taking it, or they're finding students who come back, who leave college, and now they're 30, having been a barista, and say, what do I do with myself? And I work with retirement folks, and I give it to them, and they go, wow, look at these kind of hidden talents I've never used. I might not use them for pay, but I want to use them in my own social engagement or ways I volunteer. So while we don't really say a lot about that, because we're focusing right now initially, because we're a 4-year-old company in the 14 to 27 market, I can promise you, if you take it, you're going to find the results is very helpful to you in an age bracket that might be higher.
That's very encouraging, and you hit on a point too of for the baby boomers and those that are getting ready to prior, there's a lot of applications there too, so that they can still be productive, communicate, or contribute to their communities in ways they may have not even realized throughout their whole life.
Wow. And see, I think the real issue is we want people to recognize career is not go to school and go to work. It's really your full expression of who you are. It's recognizing your career is going to be both of stability and of great change. It's not a linear pathway. But what if I had this information about myself, about what naturally comes to me, what is stable about what I do best, and what are those aptitudes? And I had the language to tell stories about myself, I would automatically be drawn to activities that I use my internal motivation about. To me, that's just the magic of it all. We have not done that. And I'm guilty of using interest-only approaches, which my data has shown you is problematic.
That is very exciting, and it gives us a new mission as counselors and advisors, working with students and with their parents, and being able to communicate with them, what really matters and how to really help their students take those next steps toward higher education or that next chapter in their lives.
Exactly. What I haven't shared with you is I also just came off a 3-year gig with AARP, developing a program called Life Reimagined. And I was just struck by how many people at 50 are able to leave because of traditional retirement, or they have the ability to do that. And they're often saying, what's next for me? And I talk about, well, what are your natural hidden gifts and aptitudes? And they're surprised about this language they never heard about before. So I'm finding Use Science, which again is www.youscience.com. You'll find all the things I think you need there that'll be encouraging. And as I've shared with you, Cindy, we're happy to give a passcode to everyone here who would like one. Our best way to help you understand it is take it, and then you'll find the progress. When I think of Bob and Lisa Carlton out at Career Match Point in Texas, or Dana Reeder in Texas, they're high users of Use Science. It's changed their whole practice because they're able to give this offline to their students. They then take the results, they come in and do a high level of walkthrough, because now we've got great data that they can talk to their students about, and they can really get them to write their letters of recommendation and look at majors that fit them, and why it's all going to be a much better experience to go to school and spend that money if you have that information.
Well, and that's a other point too, and that's what's prompting a lot of this, is because college has gotten so expensive. To go and spend, it used to be you could go spend 4 years in college, find yourself, and then come out, and then end up as the barista from Brown on the couch, and trying to find ways to avoid that really does make a lot of sense. And it's going to become even more pressing as time goes on, because we don't see the expenses going down. They're just going to be going up.
That's right.
So we have a few more questions, and then I hope everybody was able to write down the URL, the Use Science website. We've gotten a lot of questions on that, and as Dr. Feller just mentioned, we'll be sending out an email that will give you a copy of this recording, and then we'll also give you an invitation that if you're interested, we can have permission to use your email and send it to Dr. Feller, and then you can get a link to try Use Science for yourself.
Yeah, with any interest, I'll be happy to send you an invite to do that. And also, I think, Cindy, I'll send you a link to the short videotape it's kind of hip, and you get a good shot of it in 2 minutes. And right now, our attention span is always so short, we've got to do it in short pieces. Also want people to recognize that Use Science is good, hard career science. This is not self-report data. So as a result of that, we have to take an hour and a half to get this data collected. But what's neat is you can take it in 5-minute bites. You can take it over a number of days. And we encourage people to think about that, because it does take really good effort to have really good science. But the data is so rich, that's the quality of your now information you can provide to your clients that you can't do any other way.
True. And that's probably the one thing that I realized and have pointed out to my students in the UCLA classes and other places, is that this is the only one that I know is not self-reported data. And there's a bias, as we've already pointed out, when you're telling things about yourself. And commission, errors of commission and omission. And so this is looking at those aptitudes, that natural and stable ability. So one of the questions is this only available to professionals? So you mentioned that students and parents will come on and be able to purchase the use science and use it for themselves. So is there a version for the professionals for us to have a special report, or is there any difference? How does that work?
Yeah, we have on our website, you can buy it in retail for $29 because a lot of people are looking for those kind of tools. And the way we've made it is kind of a consumer report product, so you can get all kinds of information that you can do it yourself, learn from. And you also can call upon good people like your audience to help do deeper walkthroughs. But what I can share with you is right now we have for sale to any independent coach or counselor 10 copies of Use Science for $100. That's $10 a purchase price, which allows you then to upsell that if you have an audience or sell a program. Frankly, you can't compete with that. Right. In addition, we have now large-scale license programs to groups that are buying lots of them, and our price is lower than that based upon the size of their purchase. To be very honest, we are someday, or my goal, and I'm only a piece of this large puzzle, we don't want price ever to be a factor of not helping someone get feedback about their aptitudes. And what we do quite nicely is work with the business community, and they see the power of this. So we have great aspirations that price will never be a reason somebody doesn't have access to good feedback about their aptitudes. I'm very hopeful. Our company is very mission driven because I can tell you they helped create WebMD, so you know what their mission was. Mm-hmm. Our CEO is just so personally driven by this that we're real excited about the potential. And I do think it's very, very disruptive. The whole state of Georgia now provides this free to every high school. And we're talking to other states that are looking at this as well. But we have other large-scale efforts underway. And I just hope your folks find this as a tool that allows them to better serve students, because what's cool is they have the skills in the walkthrough to go even deeper and deeper with these students. And if you're writing letters or preparing papers for these students, use our Describing Me section. It gives you language that just reads so nicely off the paper, and students love to see that.
That's the key. That's goes to the everything. The students can connect and engage and find value and meaning. Then that's exactly what we need. So there are lots more questions, but that we're not going to have time to get to today. But I'm going to go to a couple at the end. Jaleesa asked if there's an expiration for the 10 copies. So if they do the 10 copies for $100, is that to use over a period of time? How does that?
Julia, thank you for that question. I honestly am not involved in the marketing, so I will say to you, go ahead and call Use Science and work that out with them. I don't know the answer and don't want to be incorrect. It's going to be my hypothesis that there probably is not any term limit on it, but I don't want to state that with any sense of official capacity. Call Use Science. They'll be happy to work with you. Go on the chat line, which is right on our website. Just ask that question on chat. They'll get right back to you. There's a person at the phone all the time. So that's the best way to approach that question.
And Brett talks about, let's see if I can find his, how he's been using it for many years and loves the reports and the insights and things like that it gives. And I do want to point out that this is both for schools, for independents, for career centers. I mean, this is something that can be applied any place that you're working with students and trying to help them understand what their potential is and what their next steps are going to be. And, we as educators, that's the journey that we're sending our students, that we're walking with our students through. And it's wonderful to find tools that step outside of the box, because we all hear about, well, do what you love, and yet there are some problems with that. And so being able to really help and guide students and inform parents is what one of our roles are. So,
I lived with a lot of unconscious incompetence. I didn't think about aptitudes. I was unconsciously incompetent, and my goal is to try to get competent and be conscious of the tools that are out there. I don't like marketing. I'm not a salesperson. I'm just trying to suggest to people I can do my work better with better science And I think at the price points we're able to provide this, every one of you in your audience can do better work, because the quality of your work through, your ability to take this information and go further, that's what you do so well. And then what I would say is, because it's on a phone and students can access the results and see the language, the portability is quite amazing, and that would be my hope. We're working to providing additional training in this for counselors. The demand is very high. Train me to be better at interpreting this. We're working at that. But again, we're also trying to make sure our science is great, and that's where we're spending most of our time.
That sounds good. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. And we have recorded this, and we will be sending that out. So if you have other colleagues that haven't been able to join us today, you'll be able to share that. And Dr. Feller, you'll have a copy of this as well. And I hope lots of people go to the Use Science website and go to your website as well, which is regfeller.com. I understand you're also available for speaking engagements to come talk about the importance of this type of thing. Is that correct?
Cindy, thank you for what you're doing. We're all trying to make the world a better place, and I know the audience is motivated about this as I am, doing good work. Thank you again.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And join us again for the next interview, which will be next month. And check it out on our website at guidedpath.net. We will be interviewing Dr. C. Miller, who wrote Generation Z Goes to College. So thank you, everyone. This concludes our interview for today.